In January, I was at a cousin's house. My husband went to the kitchen to prepare our baby daughter's bottle. I was looking through the door that opened into the living room, and in my peripheral vision, I thought I saw my husband walk by and go over by the couch. He was just staring at me and smiling. But then, a few moments later, my husband came out from the kitchen and walked into the room with the baby's bottle. Meanwhile, the mysterious face I'd seen stayed in the same place for a little while and then disappeared. A few years ago, my parents went through a very difficult separation. We moved into a smaller house, and by the end of the first day, my youngest brother, who was about 5 years old, seemed to change completely. He went from being a rambunctious troublemaker to a very quiet child, and at first we thought that this was great because the kid had been driving us crazy. But even 2 weeks after the move, we began to feel a little concerned that he wouldn't go into the kitchen or into the backyard alone. One day, some friends came over and we spent the whole afternoon playing in the yard. My brother was having so much fun that he didn't even realize it was getting dark. Suddenly, he went white as a sheet and started crying, saying that there was a scary boy with a messed up face on the roof calling out to him. 2 days later, a neighbor told us that shortly before we moved in, the couple who'd lived there went out one night and left their 6-year-old son locked inside. The kid had tried to make something to eat and ended up setting fire to the kitchen. The neighbors managed to put out the fire, but the child apparently died right there in the yard. When my mom got back to the house, she started to frantically scrape the kitchen wall, and lo and behold, under the white paint was a burned wall. We moved out a few days later. My aunt had a spooky experience in the first house that she lived in after getting married. The house was a kind of basement with a really low roof, and she had to stoop down to enter. The story goes that every night when she slept, she felt something squeezing her chest. One night, she opened her eyes and looked at the edge of the bed and saw that the mattress was dipped downward as if someone was sitting there. She decided to call in a folk healer and a priest to clean out the house, and only then did the haunting stop. One day I was over at a neighbor's house to lend her some things for a Halloween party. One of her friends, who I'd never met before, started talking about spirits. A little while later, he turned to me and said, "Wow, I am feeling really bad energy behind you. Someone who has a name that starts with an I." Then I froze and said that my grandmother's name had been Irene and that she had died about a year before. I had a dream of her often kneeling on the floor and begging for my forgiveness. This friend then told me that she was always close to me and she wasn't going anywhere until I did something about it. I live with a ghost. I rented a furnished house for an amazing price, and afterwards I started hearing some sinister noises in the attic, like footsteps or something heavy being dragged. I called the exterminator and he said that everything was okay. After a while, I started to realize that the cabinets in my kitchen simply wouldn't stay closed. Every time that I got home, more and more drawers and doors were left open. Then one day, when I came home from work, all of the doors on the wardrobe and my bedroom were opened. I called a pastor friend of my grandmother to pray over the house. It didn't work, and the ghost started turning the lights on and off, as well as the TV, while I was watching it. I did some research on the history of the house and discovered that a young lady had once died there, but I still don't know how the death came about. I've been living there for a year and 7 months. For now, I'm just putting up with my supernatural roommate, particularly since they have never done anything to cause me harm, except for making a big mess. There was a time when I was 13 and playing video games with my nephew. It was just the two of us. I thought I saw someone out of the corner of my eye in the house, but I didn't say anything. A few minutes later, my nephew asked me if Grandma was home, but I told him no. Then he asked me who was the woman that just walked by in the hallway. Only then did I jump up and the light in the kitchen burned out. Our dog started barking and growling and kept staring under the table. Years later, my nephew and I were traveling and encountered an even scarier situation. We were sharing a room, and at night I heard moaning. I thought it was my nephew having a nightmare, so I woke him up. He said he thought it was me that was moaning. Eventually, I went back to sleep, but I remember feeling a cold hand on my foot at some point in the night. My grandfather died when I was 9 years old. He was always crazy about his grandkids, and we still see him appear randomly. Every time he appears, some stuff is about to go down. In fact, he once appeared to me, and the next day, I got run over. Sometimes it was cute though. When my cousin was 3, she was getting out of a bath when suddenly she started laughing and she held up her hands, and my aunt asked her what had happened, and she said, Grandpa's pretending to hug me and blow me kisses. My aunt, who was used to dealing with these random appearances from her dead father, asked where he was. My little cousin said that he had waved goodbye and flew up towards the ceiling. My husband and I slept on the floor of his parents' house because we couldn't both fit in the single bed. One day I woke up in the middle of the night, looked under the bed, and saw my dead mother. Only she was very much alive. She extended her hand towards me, and when I reached out of it, she started burning. I screamed and woke up my in-laws, my husband, and even my neighbors. I have visions of an old man wearing an ancient black suit and a hat. For some reason, I can't look at him in the eye. I always get really sick afterwards. I then lose my voice, my breathing freezes up, and my heart pounds. Or just all the above. The day after, I usually wake up covered in bruises. We were building an addition on the back of our house, and there was a fight with our neighbor because she was using our trash bin without permission. When we went to complain, she said that whoever was going to live in the addition would be haunted just because we'd messed with her. We laughed about it, and the construction continued, but every single day my dogs would begin barking at the place uncontrollably. I got to the point where my dad went out and found a folk healer. Only after that, the dog stopped being afraid of the addition. My mother used to say that she would always see a random little girl in the house, but it hadn't happened in a while. Recently, my girlfriend was at our house and overheard my brother playing with a little girl in the living room, but there was no one actually in there with him. When we told my mom about it, she got covered in goosebumps and had a fit. We had to call to her 3 times before she regained consciousness. Could it have been the same little girl? We don't know because my mom came back to herself but said that she couldn't remember a thing. When I was around 12 years old, I woke up after midnight and there was a girl who was maybe 7 years old, kneeling and holding out a rose to me. I ran to turn on the lights and she disappeared. A few years later, my mom got pregnant and my new sister looked a lot like that little girl. When I was 10 years old, I slept with my sister in a room with a curtain for the door. One night I woke up, looked towards the curtain, and saw the silhouette of a tall, long-haired person. At this time, I thought it was my mom. When I looked away, I came face to face with the long-haired figure slouched on the edge of my bed looking at me. I instantly shook all over, got really scared, and only managed to close my eyes. I wasn't sleepy at all, but as soon as I closed my eyes, I passed out. I don't remember anything else from that night. Nothing else like that has ever happened since. But that figure really intrigues me till this day. In the early hours of January 7th, I was at my boyfriend's house and kept waking up randomly. Then at 3 a.m. or so, I woke up again feeling afraid. I thought I might go smoke a cigarette in the living room, but when I looked towards the door, I felt like someone was there watching me. The presence got stronger and stronger. I cozied up to my boyfriend, and after a while, I fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up to the news that my grandfather had died in the night around 3 a.m. My grandmother told me a story about the time when my youngest aunt was 16 years old. The family was desperate to move out of their home because a ghost wouldn't let my aunt sleep, eat, or anything at all. She lost weight really quickly and spent all night arguing with herself and telling the young man to go away because she wasn't going to marry him. Nobody believed her until one day when my uncle decided to see the ghost for himself. He pretended to be asleep in bed beside her and ran out screaming because he saw the young man too. There was this little boy ghost who I sometimes saw. The first time was when I had some friends over. It was just 3 of us until I saw the reflection of a boy wearing old-fashioned clothes. I was floored and told my friends. Suddenly, a pot in the kitchen counter was hurled through the air. Man, it scared the crap out of us. The other time was when I was in my room listening to the radio. I had left the door open and saw this boy looking at me from the doorway. When I went to see him, he took off running. I thought it was one of my brothers, but they were in the living room watching TV. Years later, I found out that my cousin saw him too. She described him perfectly to me, even though I'd never told anyone about it before. This one time, my mom thought I had come home, said hi to my sister, and gone straight to the bathroom. My mom came in to check on me. After a few minutes, saw that the bathroom was empty and gave me a call to make sure everything was okay. Imagine her shock when I picked up the phone, miles away in another city, and told her no, it wasn't me, because I had just left for work. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Stay safe, y'all. It's scary out there.